The spring rains had swollen the Carson River to a churning monster by the time Natalie Lancaster reached its banks. Her horse lame and her provisions nearly gone after 3 days of hard riding from California. Silver Peak, Nevada lay somewhere beyond those angry brown waters, and with it, the uncle who had promised her shelter after her father's death left her penniless in Sacramento. She stood at the edge watching logs and debris sweep past, calculating whether she could make it across on foot, when she heard the slow approach of hoofbeats behind her. "That river will kill you before you make it halfway," a man's voice said, low and certain. Natalie turned to find a cowboy astride a paint horse, his hat shadowing a face weathered by sun and wind. He looked to be in his late 20s, broad-shouldered beneath a worn leather vest, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. His eyes, a striking gray-blue, assessed the situation with the calm of someone who had seen trouble before and knew how to handle it. "I need to cross," Natalie said, hearing the desperation in her own voice. "My uncle is expecting me in Silver Peak." "Not today, he is not, unless you plan on arriving as a corpse downstream." The cowboy dismounted, his movements easy despite what must have been long hours in the saddle. "River's been rising for 2 days. Another foot and it will take out the bridge at Miller's Crossing." Natalie looked back at the water, her throat tight. She had sold everything she owned to make this journey, had ridden through storms and slept under stars, all to reach the one person left in the world who might want her. The thought of turning back now felt impossible. "I do not have time to wait," she said. "I have been traveling for weeks." The cowboy studied her for a long moment, taking in her mud-splattered dress, her exhausted horse, the stubborn set of her jaw. "What's your name?" "Natalie Lancaster." "Natalie Lancaster, I am Daniel Dalton. I have a ranch about 5 miles north of here. You can wait out the river there, and when it is safe to cross, I will take you across myself. But if you try to ford that river alone today, you will fall, and nobody will be able to pull you out in time." She wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could manage on her own as she had managed everything else since her father's pneumonia had taken him in February. But the river roared its threat, and she was so very tired. "I cannot impose on a stranger's hospitality." "It is not an imposition if I am offering." Daniel's voice softened slightly. "Besides, your horse needs rest. He is favoring his left foreleg." Natalie glanced at her gelding, guilt washing through her. She had been pushing too hard, thinking only of reaching her destination. "He stepped wrong yesterday afternoon. He needs poultices and rest, not a river crossing. Come on. We can reach the ranch before dark if we leave now." Daniel moved to examine her horse, running expert hands down the animal's leg. The gelding whickered softly, as if recognizing someone who knew horses. Not too bad, but another day of hard riding would have made it worse. The practicality of his argument won out over her pride. Natalie nodded, watching as Daniel took the gelding's reins and began leading both horses away from the river. She walked beside him, her legs aching from days in the saddle, her dress heavy with dried mud. "How long have you been traveling alone?" Daniel asked after a few minutes of silence broken only by the horse's hooves and the distant rush of water. "Since Sacramento. Before that, I had a wagon master's family who let me travel with their party from Missouri, but they were headed to California, not Nevada." Daniel glanced at her, something like concern flickering across his features. "That is a long journey for a woman alone. I did not have much choice." The words came out sharper than she intended. "My father died in February. The landlord gave me a week to clear out. My uncle Samuel wrote that he had worked for me in Silver Peak, managing his boarding house. It was either that or try to find work in Sacramento, and the respectable positions were already filled. I am sorry about your father." The genuine sympathy in his voice made Natalie's eyes sting. She blinked hard, refusing to cry in front of this stranger. He was a good man, just unlucky. They walked in silence for a while, the landscape opening up before them into high desert scrubland dotted with sagebrush and juniper. The Sierra Nevada mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still white with snow even though it was late April of 1878. The air smelled clean after the recent rains, sharp with the scent of wet earth and growing things. Daniel's ranch appeared as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, a sturdy house built of timber and stone, with a barn, corral, and several outbuildings arranged around a central yard. Natalie saw cattle grazing in the distance, and closer by, a vegetable garden that was just beginning to show green shoots. "It is not much, but it is mine," Daniel said, and she heard pride in his voice. "Bought it 3 years ago and have been building it up since." "It is beautiful," Natalie said honestly. After weeks of dusty trails and uncertain shelter, the ranch looked like paradise. A man emerged from the barn as they approached, older than Daniel by a decade, with silver threading through his dark hair. "That river crossing out," he called. "For at least 3 days, maybe more," Daniel replied. "This is Miss Lancaster. She was about to try crossing alone when I found her. Miss Lancaster, this is Tom Brennan. He has been working this ranch since before I bought it." Tom tipped his hat to Natalie, his weathered face creasing into a smile. "Welcome, miss. I will see to the horses. That gelding needs attention on his foreleg." "Thank you," Natalie said, grateful for the kindness in his eyes. Daniel led her to the house, opening the door onto a main room that was surprisingly well kept for a bachelor's home. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, with a comfortable-looking chair and small table nearby. The kitchen area was tidy, dishes washed and stacked, and through another doorway she glimpsed what must be a bedroom. "You can have my room," Daniel said, following her gaze. "I will sleep out here. I cannot take your bed. You can and you will. You look like you have not had a proper night's rest in weeks." He moved to the fireplace, kneeling to build up the fire. "There is a copper tub in the small room off the bedroom. I will heat water for a bath while you settle in." Natalie felt tears threaten again at this unexpected generosity. "You do not have to do all this." Daniel looked up at her, firelight beginning to flicker across his features. "My mother raised me to treat guests with respect, especially ones who have been through hard times. Besides, anyone who is willing to try crossing that river alone just to keep a promise to family is someone worth helping." She found herself smiling despite her exhaustion. "Your mother sounds like a wise woman." "She was. Died 5 years ago of influenza. My father followed her 6 months later. I think he just did not want to be in a world without her." Daniel stood, brushing his hands on his pants. "Go on and rest. I will have water ready in an hour and supper after that." The bedroom was simple but clean, with a large bed covered in a quilted spread that had clearly been made by loving hands. Natalie sank onto the edge of it, her body suddenly heavy with fatigue now that she had stopped moving. She let herself lie back for just a moment, meaning only to close her eyes briefly, but sleep pulled her under like a tide. She woke to Daniel's soft knock on the door, the room dark except for lamplight spilling in from the main room. "Miss Lancaster." "Bath is ready, and I have some stew warming for supper." Natalie sat up, disoriented, then remembered where she was. "Thank you. I will be right out." The hot water was glorious, washing away days of trail dust and tension. She scrubbed her hair twice, using the soap Daniel had left, which smelled of pine and something else she could not name. When she finally emerged, wearing the cleanest dress she had left, her hair still damp and hanging loose down her back, she found Daniel setting out bowls at the small table. "Feel better?" he asked, not looking at her directly, as if giving her privacy even in his own home. "Much. I cannot thank you enough." "You can thank me by eating. You look like you have been missing too many meals." He ladled stew into both bowls, the rich smell making Natalie's stomach clench with hunger. They ate in comfortable silence at first, the stew thick with meat and vegetables that must have come from the ranch's own stores. Natalie could not remember the last time she had eaten something so satisfying. "Tell me about Silver Peak," she said finally. "I have never been there. I only know what my uncle wrote in his letters." Daniel finished chewing before answering. "Small town, maybe 200 people. Has a boarding house, which your uncle must run, a general store, saloon, and not much else. Most folks are ranchers or work the small silver mines in the hills. It is a decent place if you do not mind quiet." "I think I am ready for quiet," Natalie admitted. "Sacramento was loud and crowded, and after my father died, it felt impossible to breathe there. Too many memories on every corner." "I know something about that," Daniel said quietly. "I grew up in Texas, left after my parents died because everything there reminded me of them. Came out here looking for a fresh start. Do you regret it?" "No. This is home now. I have built something here, something that is mine, that matters." He met her eyes across the table, and Natalie felt a strange flutter in her chest at the intensity of his gaze. "You will build something too once you reach your uncle. A new life, a fresh start." "I hope so," she said, but uncertainty colored her words. She barely knew Uncle Samuel, had only met him twice in her childhood when he passed through Missouri on business. What if he had changed his mind about taking her in? What if the boarding house had no room for her after all? Daniel seemed to read her thoughts. "Try not to borrow trouble. Things will work out." After supper, Daniel insisted she take the bedroom again while he made up a bedroll by the fire. Natalie was too exhausted to argue, and the bed welcomed her like an embrace. She slept deeply, without dreams, and woke to morning sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of coffee and bacon. When she emerged, she found Daniel already up, cooking breakfast with easy competence. "Morning," he said, glancing over his shoulder. "Coffee is ready." "You are spoiling me," Natalie said, pouring herself a cup. The coffee was strong and hot, exactly what she needed, making up for all those cold camps on the trail. Daniel slid bacon and eggs onto a plate and handed it to her. "I checked the river at dawn. Still too high to cross safely. Maybe tomorrow or the day after." Natalie should have felt frustrated by the delay, but instead she felt oddly relieved. One more day of safety, of rest, of not having to face whatever awaited her in Silver Peak. "What can I do to help around here? I do not want to be useless." Daniel looked surprised. "You are a guest. A guest who is delaying your work by being here. Put me to use." She smiled at him over her coffee cup. "I may be city-bred, but I know how to work. My father and I were not wealthy. I can cook, clean, mend, and I am not afraid of hard labor." Something like respect flickered in Daniel's eyes. "Well, if you are offering, I could use help in the garden. The vegetables are coming up, but the weeds are too. Tom and I have been too busy with the cattle to keep up with it." So Natalie found herself spending the morning on her knees in the garden, pulling weeds and thinning seedlings under the warming sun. It felt good to work with her hands, to see the immediate results of her labor. Daniel worked nearby, mending a section of fence, and occasionally they would talk across the distance between them, casual conversations about nothing important that somehow felt significant. She learned that Daniel was 28, that he had worked as a ranch hand in Texas, before saving enough to buy his own place, that he loved this wild Nevada country with its big skies and hard beauty. He learned that she was 22, that her father had been a clerk who dreamed of better things for his daughter, that she could read and write and do figures, skills that would serve her well managing a boarding house. Tom joined them for the midday meal, and Natalie insisted on cooking, producing a simple but filling lunch from the supplies in Daniel's well-stocked pantry. The older man raised his eyebrows in appreciation after the first bite. "You can cook, Miss Lancaster. That is a blessing. These two bachelors have been eating mostly beans and bacon for years." "I am not that bad," Daniel protested, but he was grinning. "You are exactly that bad," Tom retorted. "Remember the time you tried to make stew and burned it so bad we had to throw out the pot?" Natalie laughed at Daniel's sheepish expression, feeling lighter than she had in months. There was something healing about this place, about the easy camaraderie between the two men, about the simple rhythms of ranch life. That afternoon, Daniel asked if she wanted to ride out to see the cattle, and she agreed eagerly, grateful that her horse's leg had improved enough for gentle walking. They rode out across the range island, Daniel pointing out landmarks and talking about his plans to expand the herd, to build a bigger barn, to maybe start breeding horses as well as raising cattle. "You have big dreams," Natalie observed. "Is that wrong?" "No, it is wonderful. Too many people settle for what they have instead of reaching for what they want." Daniel looked at her thoughtfully. "What do you want, Natalie? Beyond reaching Silver Peak, beyond managing your uncle's boarding house?" The question caught her off guard. Nobody had asked her that in years, maybe ever. "I want stability," she said slowly. "I want to know where I will sleep each night, that I will have enough to eat, that I am not one disaster away from being destitute. I want to feel safe. That is not a dream, that is survival." "What do you dream about?" Natalie was quiet for a long moment, watching the cattle graze in the distance. "I dream about having a home," she said finally. "A real home, not just a room I rent. A place that is mine where I can put down roots and grow something beautiful. I dream about maybe having a family someday, children who will never have to worry the way I did, who will always have enough." "Those are good dreams," Daniel said softly. They rode back as the sun began to sink, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Natalie helped with the evening chores, feeding chickens and collecting eggs while Daniel and Tom saw to the horses. Supper was another shared meal, comfortable and easy, and afterward Natalie mended one of Daniel's shirts that had a torn seam while he read aloud from a book of poetry his mother had loved. His voice was surprisingly good for reading, with a rhythm and warmth that brought the words to life. Natalie found herself watching him in the lamplight, noticing the strong line of his jaw, the way his hands held the book gently, as if it was precious. She felt a pang of something she did not want to name, a longing for this peace to continue, for these simple domestic moments to stretch on indefinitely. That night, lying in Daniel's bed with the quilt pulled up to her chin, Natalie admitted to herself what she had been trying to ignore all day. She was falling for Daniel Dalton, this kind cowboy who had offered his hand when she needed it most. It was foolish, dangerous even. She would be leaving in a day or two, heading to Silver Peak and a new life that did not include him. Letting herself care would only make it harder. But her heart, it seemed, had other ideas. The next morning dawned clear and bright, and when Daniel checked the river, he returned with news that made Natalie's stomach drop. "It has gone down some, but not enough. Maybe tomorrow." She should have been frustrated, should have insisted they try anyway. Instead, she felt a guilty relief that gave her one more day in this place, with this man who made her feel things she had thought herself too practical to feel. They fell into an easy routine, working alongside each other with the natural rhythm of people who fit together well. Natalie baked bread, the smell filling the house with warmth and comfort. Daniel taught her how to rope fence posts, patient when she fumbled, encouraging when she got it right. Tom watched them both with knowing eyes, saying nothing but smiling in a way that made Natalie blush. In the afternoon, Daniel took her riding again, this time to a spot where a small creek fed into a pond surrounded by cottonwood trees. "This is my favorite place on the ranch," he said as they dismounted. "I come here when I need to think." Natalie could see why. The water was clear and still, reflecting the sky like a mirror. Birds sang in the trees and wildflowers dotted the grass in splashes of yellow and purple. It felt like a secret place, hidden and sacred. They sat by the water's edge, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "I am going to miss this," Natalie said quietly, "the ranch, all of it. The peace, the beauty, the feeling of being somewhere I belong." She turned to look at him, her heart in her throat. "I am going to miss you, Daniel." His expression shifted, something intense and vulnerable flickering across his features. "Natalie, I know you have your plans, your uncle waiting for you in Silver Peak. But I have to tell you something, and if it makes things awkward, I am sorry." "What is it?" "These past 2 days have been the best I have had in longer than I can remember. Not just because you cook better than Tom and I combined, not just because you work hard without complaining. It is you. Your strength, your determination, the way you smile even when things are hard. I know we just met, I know this is fast, but I cannot let you leave without telling you that I feel something for you, something real and deep and terrifying." Natalie's breath caught. "Daniel, I feel it too. I have been trying not to, trying to be practical, but I feel it too." He reached for her hand, his fingers warm and calloused against hers. "Then stay. Not just tonight, not just until the river is safe to cross. Stay here with me. Help me build this ranch into something great. Let me show you every day how precious you are, how glad I am that you tried to cross that river alone so I could find you and offer my hand." Tears spilled down Natalie's cheeks, but they were not sad tears. "What about my uncle? He is expecting me." "We can send him a letter, explain the situation. If the boarding house needs a manager, he can find someone else. But if you want to honor your commitment to him, we can figure that out too. We can make this work, Natalie, if you want to." "I want to," she whispered. "I want to stay. I want to build a life here with you. It is crazy and impulsive and nothing like the practical plan I had, but I want it more than anything." Daniel pulled her close, and when he kissed her, it felt like coming home. His lips were gentle at first, tentative, but when she responded, wrapping her arms around his neck, the kiss deepened into something that spoke of longing and promise and hope. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "I will spend every day making sure you never regret this choice," he said. "I know you will." They rode back to the ranch holding hands, grinning at each other like fools. Tom took one look at them and let out a whoop. "About time. I was wondering how long it would take you two to figure out what was obvious to everyone else." "You have known us for 2 days," Daniel pointed out, but he was laughing. 2 days is long enough to see when people fit together right. "Welcome home, Miss Lancaster." "Call me Natalie," she said, smiling. "If I am going to be staying, we should not stand on ceremony." That evening they composed a letter to Uncle Samuel together, Daniel's hand steadier with the pen than Natalie's trembling one. They explained the situation honestly, apologizing for the change of plans, but offering to help find a replacement manager if needed. Daniel insisted on including money to cover the cost of Natalie's journey, even though she protested. "You spent your savings getting here based on a promise," he said firmly. "The least we can do is make sure your uncle does not suffer financially because you are staying with me instead." The next few weeks passed in a blur of happiness and hard work. Natalie threw herself into making the ranch house a true home, sewing curtains for the windows, planting flowers near the door, organizing and cleaning until everything shone. Daniel watched her transform his bachelor space into something warm and welcoming, his eyes soft with wonder. They courted in the evenings, taking walks under the stars, sharing stories of their pasts, dreaming aloud about their future. Daniel was a gentleman, never pushing for more than she was ready to give, though Natalie could feel the desire that burned between them like a banked fire, waiting for the right time to blaze. A month after Natalie's arrival, a letter came from Uncle Samuel. She opened it with shaking hands, afraid of what she might find, but her uncle's words were kind. He was disappointed to lose her services, but delighted that she had found happiness. He wrote that he had hired a widow from town to manage the boarding house, and that she was working out well. He enclosed the money Daniel had sent, saying it was not necessary, and wished them both every blessing for their future. "He approves," Natalie said, relief making her voice shake. Daniel pulled her into his arms. "Then there is nothing stopping us. Marry me, Natalie. Make this official. Make this forever." "Yes," she said against his chest. "Yes, yes, yes." They were married in early June in a simple ceremony in the ranch house with Tom as their witness and the local circuit preacher officiating. Natalie wore a dress she had sewn herself from fabric Daniel had bought on a trip to the nearest town, cream-colored cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs. Daniel wore his best suit, his hair slicked back, looking so handsome that Natalie's heart stuttered when she saw him. The preacher spoke about love and commitment, about building a life together through joy and hardship, and Natalie felt the truth of every word in her bones. When Daniel slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, she saw her future reflected in his eyes: partnership, respect, and a love that would only deepen with time. Their wedding night was tender and sweet, Daniel patient and gentle as he helped her navigate the mysteries of physical love. Natalie had been nervous, but his care and obvious reverence for her washed away her fears. They learned each other's bodies slowly, discovering what brought pleasure, what made breath catch and hearts race. When they finally came together fully, it felt like a sacred thing, a completion of the vows they had spoken earlier that day. "I love you," Daniel whispered afterward, holding her close in the darkness. "I will love you every day for the rest of my life." "I love you too," Natalie replied, tracing patterns on his chest. "Thank you for being there at the river, for offering your hand when I needed it most. Thank you for taking it." The summer passed in golden contentment. Natalie managed the household with efficiency and care, freeing Daniel and Tom to focus on the ranch work. She learned to ride better, helping with the cattle when they needed moving. She tended her garden religiously, and by August, they were eating fresh vegetables with every meal. She made friends with the neighboring ranch wives, who welcomed her warmly and taught her the particular skills needed for frontier life. Daniel proved to be everything Natalie had hoped for in a husband. He was steady and reliable, coming home each evening ready to share the day's events. He listened when she talked, valued her opinions, and never made her feel less than his full partner. Their physical relationship deepened as well, the initial shyness giving way to a passionate intimacy that left them both breathless and satisfied. In September, Natalie missed her monthly courses. She waited another month to be sure before telling Daniel, wanting to be certain before raising his hopes. When she finally told him on a crisp October evening, his face went through a series of emotions so quickly she almost laughed. Shock, disbelief, joy, fear, and finally a blazing happiness that made him look 10 years younger. "A baby," he breathed. "We are going to have a baby." "Yes. Next spring, if my calculations are right." He swept her up and spun her around, then immediately set her down, looking panicked. "I am sorry, I should not have done that. Are you all right? Do you need to sit down?" Should you be resting? Natalie laughed, cupping his face in her hands. I am fine. Pregnant women do not break easily. But yes, you are going to be a father. Daniel's eyes filled with tears, and he pulled her close, his hand splaying protectively over her still flat stomach. I am going to take such good care of you both, I promise. And he did. As Natalie's pregnancy progressed, Daniel became almost comically protective, insisting she rest more, trying to take over all her chores until she firmly told him that she was pregnant, not helpless. They compromised, with Natalie doing lighter work and letting Daniel and Tom handle the heavier tasks. The winter was mild that year, for which Natalie was grateful. Her belly swelled steadily, and by February she felt enormous, her back aching and her ankles swollen. Daniel rubbed her feet every evening, talking softly to her stomach, telling their unborn child stories about the ranch, about the parents who were waiting eagerly to meet them. In early April, as the snow in the distant mountains began to melt and the first flowers pushed up through the earth, Natalie went into labor. It was long and difficult, the pain like nothing she had ever experienced, but Daniel stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, encouraging her through each contraction. The neighboring ranch wife who served as midwife was patient and capable, coaching Natalie through the final pushes. When their son finally emerged into the world, red-faced and wailing, Natalie burst into tears of relief and joy. Daniel took the baby with shaking hands, looking down at his son with an expression of such pure love that Natalie fell in love with him all over again. He is perfect, Daniel said, his voice rough with emotion. He is absolutely perfect. They named him David after Daniel's father. He was a healthy baby with a good appetite and his father's gray-blue eyes. Natalie had never known she could love something so fiercely that the sight of her son's tiny fingers wrapped around hers could make her chest ache with feeling. Daniel was a devoted father from the start, taking over many of the household tasks so Natalie could rest and recover. He changed diapers without complaint, walked the floor with David when he fussed at night, and spent hours just staring at his son with wonder in his eyes. How did I get so lucky? He asked one night, lying in bed with Natalie curled against his side and David sleeping in a cradle nearby. A year ago I was a bachelor rancher with nothing but work to fill my days. Now I have you and David, and every day feels like a gift. We are the lucky ones, Natalie said softly. You saved me, Daniel. You gave me a home and a family and a life I never dreamed I could have. We saved each other. As David grew from a baby to a toddler, the ranch prospered. Daniel's careful management and hard work paid off in a growing herd and increasing profits. They were able to hire another hand to help Tom, and Daniel began the horse breeding program he had dreamed about. Natalie's garden expanded, and she started selling excess vegetables in town, adding to their income. Silver Peak remained a quiet town, but Natalie found she did not mind. She had friends among the ranch families, and the community came together for church services, dances, and holidays. She and Daniel became known as a couple who had started with nothing but each other and built something solid and enduring. When David was 2, Natalie became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and in the spring of 1881 she gave birth to a daughter they named Nora, after Daniel's mother. Nora had her mother's dark hair and her father's determination, and from the moment she could crawl, she was getting into everything. David adored his little sister, following her around protectively and bringing her toys when she cried. Watching her children together made Natalie's heart swell with gratitude for the life she had built, for the moment of chance that had brought her to that river crossing where Daniel had offered his hand. The years rolled on in a rhythm of seasons and growth. David started learning to help with the ranch work, following his father and Tom around with eager eyes and a million questions. Nora proved to have a way with horses, able to gentle even the most skittish animals. In 1884, Natalie gave birth to another son, whom they named Thomas after Tom, who had become like family. By 1885, the ranch was well established and profitable. Daniel had built the bigger barn he had dreamed of, and the horse breeding program was producing some of the finest animals in the region. Natalie had turned her vegetable sales into a small but thriving business, supplying several stores in surrounding towns. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable, secure in a way that Natalie had once thought impossible. One evening in late spring, as they sat on the porch watching their children play in the yard, Daniel took Natalie's hand. "Do you remember the day we met? Every detail," she said, squeezing his fingers. "I was so desperate, so determined to cross that river even though it would probably have killed me. I am glad it was high that day. I am glad you tried to cross alone, because it gave me the chance to offer you my hand and everything that came after." Natalie turned to look at him, this man who had become her whole world. Silver threaded through his dark hair now, and lines had deepened around his eyes, but to her he was as handsome as he had been that first day. "You have given me everything, Daniel. A home, a family, safety, love. You have given me a life beyond my wildest dreams." "We gave those things to each other," he corrected gently. "You made this house a home. You raised our children to be good and kind. You built a business from dirt and seeds. Everything I have accomplished, I accomplished because you were beside me." Their oldest son called out from the yard, asking if he could show his father how high he could climb in the cottonwood tree by the house. Daniel stood, pressing a kiss to Natalie's forehead before going to join their children. Natalie watched them, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. She thought about that desperate woman who had stood at the river's edge 7 years ago, weighing her chances of making it across alone. She thought about the kindness of a stranger who had offered his hand and, in doing so, had offered everything else as well. She thought about the courage it had taken to accept that hand, to trust a man she did not know, to change her plans and reach for something uncertain but precious. Later that night, after the children were asleep and she and Daniel were preparing for bed, he pulled her close. "I love you, Natalie Dalton. I have loved you from the moment I saw you standing at that river, too stubborn to admit you needed help." "I was not too stubborn," she protested, laughing. "I just needed the right person to offer." They made love that night with the easy familiarity of long partnership, but also with the passion that had never faded between them. Afterward, lying in the darkness with Daniel's arm around her and the sounds of their sleeping children down the hall, Natalie felt peace settle over her like a blessing. This was the life she had dreamed of on that long journey from Missouri. This was the home she had yearned for. Not just a physical place, but a sense of belonging, of being woven into the fabric of something larger than herself. She belonged to this land, to this ranch, to this family, and they belonged to her. In 1887, their family grew again with the birth of twin girls, Emily and Alina, who brought chaos and joy in equal measure. The house rang with children's laughter, with arguments and games and bedtime stories. Natalie's days were full to bursting, but she would not have traded them for anything. Daniel proved to be as devoted to their growing family as he had been when it was just David. He made time for each child, learning what made them unique and nurturing their individual interests. David, now 10, was clearly going to be a rancher like his father. Nora, at 8, spent every free moment with the horses. Little Thomas, at 5, loved books and was already learning to read beyond his years. The twins, at 2, were into everything and afraid of nothing. Tom, now well into his 60s, had become like a grandfather to the children. He taught them to rope and ride, told them stories of the old days, and always had peppermints in his pockets for whoever found him first. He had become such an integral part of the family that they had long ago stopped thinking of him as hired help and simply considered him family. As the decade drew to a close, Natalie found herself occasionally working with the other ranch wives to help newcomers to the area, particularly women traveling alone. She never forgot what Daniel's kindness had meant to her, how one outstretched hand had changed the course of her life. She wanted to pay that forward, to be the helping hand for someone else who needed it. One autumn afternoon in 1889, a young woman arrived at the ranch, sent by a neighbor who knew of Natalie's willingness to help. The woman was pregnant, alone, and desperate, fleeing an abusive situation back east. Natalie took one look at her exhausted, frightened face and saw herself 11 years earlier, standing at a river and contemplating an impossible crossing. "Come inside," Natalie said gently. "You are safe here." Daniel, coming in from the range, assessed the situation with a single glance and nodded his approval. They set the young woman up in a small room they had added to the house for just such purposes, fed her, and let her rest. Over the following weeks, they helped her find a small house in town and a job that would support her and her coming child. Natalie visited regularly, bringing food and supplies, offering friendship and support. "This is who we are," Daniel said one evening, watching Natalie prepare a basket of goods for their new friend. "We are people who offer a hand to those who need it." "Because someone once did it for us," Natalie replied, kissing his cheek. The turn of the century found the Dalton family thriving. The ranch had grown substantially, now one of the most successful in the region. David, at 21, was managing much of the daily operations, with Daniel transitioning into more of an oversight role. Nora, at 19, had married a neighboring rancher's son, though she still came by regularly to work with the horses she loved. Thomas, at 16, was considering going to college to study law, a prospect that filled Natalie with pride. The twins, at 13, were the heart and soul of the household, keeping everyone young with their endless energy. Natalie and Daniel's hair had more silver than dark now, and their bodies bore the wear of decades of hard work. But their love had only deepened, maturing from the passionate intensity of youth into something even stronger. A partnership built on mutual respect, shared dreams, and daily choices to put each other first. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Daniel took Natalie back to the pond where he had first told her he loved her. The cottonwood trees had grown larger, and the ranch had changed in countless ways, but this spot remained their sanctuary. 20 years, Daniel said, holding her close. 20 years since I found you at that river, determined to cross alone no matter the cost. Best 20 years of my life, Natalie replied. Every single day. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had tried to cross without me, if you had made it somehow? Natalie considered this. I would have reached Silver Peak, I suppose. I would have managed my uncle's boarding house, built a different life. But it would not have been this life. It would not have been you or our children or this home. So no, I try not to think about it, because I cannot imagine any other path that would have made me as happy. Daniel kissed her then, soft and sweet, a kiss that spoke of long years together and many more to come. I love you, Natalie Dalton, more today than yesterday, less than tomorrow. I love you too. Thank you for offering your hand when I needed it most. Thank you for taking it. As the new century progressed, the Dalton family continued to grow and change. David married and began building his own section of the ranch, bringing home a bride who fit seamlessly into the family. Thomas did go to law school, graduating with honors and opening a practice in Carson City, though he visited the ranch often. Nora had her first child, making Daniel and Natalie grandparents, a role they embraced with joy. The twins showed no signs of settling down yet, both interested in running the business side of the ranch operations. Tom passed away peacefully in 1903, surrounded by the family he had chosen. His death hit them all hard, particularly Daniel, who had known the older man for so long. They buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch, where he could watch over the land he had helped build. At the service, Daniel spoke of loyalty and friendship, of how family was not always about blood, but about who showed up when you needed them most. In 1905, as Natalie was turning 50, she and Daniel sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the Nevada sky in shades of fire. Their eldest granddaughter played in the yard, chasing chickens and laughing with pure joy. The ranch stretched out around them, solid and prosperous, a testament to decades of hard work and love. "We built something good here," Natalie said softly. "We did," Daniel agreed, his hand finding hers automatically the way it had done thousands of times over the years. "And it will outlast us, carried on by our children and grandchildren. That is a legacy worth having." Daniel turned to look at her, his gray-blue eyes still as striking as they had been the day they met. "My legacy is not the ranch or the money or the land. My legacy is the life I built with you, the love we shared, the family we created. Everything else is just details." Natalie felt tears sting her eyes, the good kind, the kind that came from being so happy it overflowed. "You always did have a way with words. Only when talking about you." As night fell and the stars began to emerge, they remained on the porch, content in each other's presence. Inside the house, they could hear the sounds of their family. David and his wife discussing the next day's work, the twins arguing good-naturedly about something trivial, their granddaughter being put to bed with a story. This was what Natalie had dreamed of all those years ago. Not the specifics, perhaps, but the feeling. The sense of belonging, of being rooted in place and purpose. The knowledge that she was loved and valued, that she had built something lasting. She thought about that desperate woman at the river's edge, and she wished she could go back and tell her younger self that everything would be all right. That the cowboy who offered his hand was offering so much more than help across a swollen river. He was offering a future, a family, a love that would sustain her through every joy and sorrow life brought. But then again, perhaps it was better that her younger self did not know. Perhaps the uncertainty, the leap of faith required to accept Daniel's hand, was part of what made their love so strong. They had chosen each other without guarantees, trusting their instincts and their hearts, and that choice had made all the difference. The years continued to roll by as years do. There were more grandchildren, and eventually great-grandchildren. There were losses, too, as friends and neighbors passed on, as their own bodies began to show the inevitable signs of age. But through it all, Natalie and Daniel remained constants for each other, the foundation upon which everything else was built. In 1910, they celebrated their 36th wedding anniversary with a huge gathering at the ranch. Family came from near and far, filling the house and spilling out into the yard. There was music and dancing, food and laughter, stories told and retold about the old days. David gave a toast about his parents' enduring love, about how they had built not just a ranch, but a legacy of kindness and partnership. As Natalie looked around at all the faces, all the people who existed because she had accepted a cowboy's offered hand 37 years ago, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. This was her tribe, her people, her family. This was what she had given the world, Not just children, but good people who would carry forward the values she and Daniel had tried to embody. Late that night, after the last guests had gone and the house was quiet, Daniel led her to their room. "Tired?" he asked. "Wonderfully so," Natalie replied. "It was a beautiful day. Every day with you is beautiful." He helped her out of her dress, his movements slow but tender. They had done this countless times, this ritual of undressing and preparing for bed, but it never felt routine. It felt like care, like intimacy, like love. They lay together in the darkness, Daniel's arm around her, her head on his chest, listening to his steady heartbeat. "I hope I go first," Natalie said suddenly. "Do not talk like that. I mean it. I do not want to be in a world without you, Daniel. I do not think I could bear it." He held her tighter. "We will go together when the time comes, old and happy and surrounded by family, but not for a long time yet. We have years ahead of us still." And they did have years, precious years filled with the simple joys of growing old together. They slowed down, letting David take over more of the ranch management, spending their time with grandchildren and great-grandchildren, tending a smaller garden, taking walks when their bodies allowed. Daniel's health began to fail first, his heart growing weaker. Natalie cared for him with the same devotion he had shown her through pregnancies and illnesses over the years. She read to him, brought him meals, sat beside him for hours just holding his hand. "I am sorry," he said one afternoon in the summer of 1914. "I wanted to give you more time." "You have given me everything," Natalie replied, tears streaming down her face. "You have given me 58 years of happiness. Do not apologize for that. Stay strong for me," he whispered. "Take care of the family. Make sure they remember what we built here." "I will, I promise." Daniel Dalton passed away on an August evening with his wife and children surrounding him. He went peacefully, his last word Natalie's name on his lips. The funeral was the largest Silver Peak had ever seen, people coming from all over to pay respects to a man who had been a pillar of the community, a good neighbor, a devoted father and grandfather, and a loving husband. Natalie thought her grief would kill her. The world felt wrong without Daniel in it, like a house with half its walls missing. She moved through the days mechanically, going through the motions because her children and grandchildren needed her to, but inside she felt hollow. But as the weeks turned into months, something shifted. She began to remember not just the loss, but the gift of having had him at all. She remembered that day at the river, the kindness of a stranger who became her everything. She remembered 58 years of love, of partnership, of building a life together brick by brick and day by day. And she realized that Daniel was not truly gone. He lived on in their children, who had his eyes and his steadiness. He lived on in the ranch, which bore the mark of his care and vision. He lived on in her heart, in every memory, every moment they had shared. As long as she remembered him, as long as she told their story, he would never be entirely gone. Natalie lived for another 8 years after Daniel's death, surrounded by family and love. She told their story often, especially to the younger grandchildren and great-grandchildren who had never known their grandfather. She told them about the swollen river and the offered hand, about how sometimes the bravest thing you can do is accept help when you need it, about how love can strike like lightning and last a lifetime. In the spring of 1922, at the age of 66, Natalie passed away peacefully in her sleep. She was buried beside Daniel on the hill, overlooking the ranch, where they could watch over the land and family they had built together. At her funeral, her oldest grandson read from a journal she had kept, entries about her early days at the ranch, about falling in love, about the joy of building a life with someone who saw you and valued you and chose you every single day. The ranch continued to thrive under David's management and eventually passed to his children. The story of how it all began, of the desperate woman at the river and the cowboy who offered his hand, became family legend, told and retold at gatherings and holidays. It became a touchstone, a reminder of where they came from and what they valued: kindness to strangers, the courage to take chances on love, and the understanding that sometimes the greatest gifts come when we are willing to reach out and trust someone else. The house that Daniel built and Natalie made a home still stands, expanded over the years but retaining its original heart. In the main room above the fireplace hangs a photograph of Natalie and Daniel from their 20th anniversary, looking at each other with such obvious love that it makes anyone who sees it smile. Below the photograph, a small plaque reads, "Take my hand and I will take yours. Together we can cross any river." It is a reminder, passed down through generations, of a chance meeting on a spring day in 1878 when a woman tried to cross a river alone and a cowboy said, "Take my hand or you will fall." It is a reminder that sometimes the best things in life come not from stubbornly going it alone, but from being brave enough to accept an offered hand. It is a reminder that love, real love, starts with a choice to trust and grows through 1,000 daily decisions to choose each other again and again. And somewhere, in whatever comes after this life, two souls walk hand in hand beside a river that runs clear and peaceful, content in the knowledge that they loved well and built something that would last long after they were gone. Their story, like the ranch they built and the family they created, endures as a testament to the power of kindness, the courage of trust, and the transformative magic of love that starts with an outstretched hand and the willingness to take it.